Just to put it in context, I will just make a few remarks about, as Faith has asked me to do, the actual real threats happening in eastern Sudan, the Beja Band, and its impact on the Red Sea area, its impact on the Horn of Africa, its impact across the Middle East Arab African zone. And that is happening at a time of major changes happening across the continent. A shift in power in Egypt, where the Muslim Brotherhood are on the rise, with their allies, the Salafists. They are going to be forming the next government. In Libya, the downfall of a dictator, a bloody dictator, but the rise of Islamist militias and of a variety of forces in Libya that have not yet reached the level of consensus as to what the future of that country is going to be. And in Tunisia, the formation of a new government after the fall of Tunisia's authoritarian leader, Ben Ali. That new government is headed and controlled also by Islamist, mostly Salafist forces, the Nahda party and other parties. All of this is happening in the north of the continent. And all the developments that are been happening in the Sahel area, the greater Sahel area, from Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Chad. And no need to remind ourselves that the rise of the jihadist forces in Nigeria with Boko Haram is changing the entire landscape of the region. South of southern Sudan and of Sudan in general, we have a continuous action by Shabab al-Jihad in Somalia. Actions that are not still confined to Somalia, that are now spreading into other countries, including Kenya. So the surroundings of Sudan and of the Beja area, eastern Sudan, are in constant change, but that change is worrisome. It's not a change towards democracy, it's a change towards the implementation of extreme ideologies and the implementation of what we call here the jihadist movement, which basically goes against the rights of minorities, of women, of ethnicities, and of even silent majorities, should they be Arab or African or Middle Eastern. So that is the context in which I'd like to place some of my remarks this afternoon, and insist that it is extremely important that the Beja community, the Beja people, becomes very visible in the United States and the international community. And going back to what Faith was talking about, the book that I published 1 year before the Arab Spring, it was titled The Coming Revolution. That was a very daring title. Even the publisher asked me many times, are you sure, Dr. Phares, that there will be changes and revolts? I said, yes. My reading tells me, it's not my instinct, I did not see any angel, it's basically internet, and it's basically the debates that have been happening, and the previous 10 years that have been happening in the region. We all know that with the collapse of the Ba'ath regime in Iraq, Iran did not have perfect democracy, or not even a mediocre democracy, but what it had was the rise of multiple political parties. And that means that there is a debate, that people start to talk and express their opinions. That's what Baghdad's message was to the region. Instead of one political party, the Ba'ath regime imposing one national identity in Iraq, if you remember. Kurds started to talk and express themselves. The Kurds are the Bejas of Iraq, or an equivalent, and they asked for autonomy. In Afghanistan, the fall of the Taliban, we don't have the best democracy on earth yet, and the Taliban are still around, but what exists there is a debate within their own parliament, which is very weak. There are multiple opinions. Those two impacted many people in the region. And then came, after 2003, and the 5-6 years after that, two tremendously important changes that sent signals to the youth and the underdogs of the region that yes, it is possible, with mass movements, unarmed mass movements to begin with, to be able to push forward for the downfall of authoritarianism and the rise of something else that would move towards democracy. In 2005, if you recall, there was a 1.5 million people in the streets of Beirut, the Cedars Revolution. And it was followed in 2009 by another 2 million people demonstrating in the streets of Tehran, the Green Revolution. So now you see that the region, which has been ruled for so long by dictators, Ba'athist dictators, Pan-Arabist dictators, Islamist dictators, Marxist dictators, including, of course, in Sudan. And you could talk more about Sudan than I do. But the region has also been sending signals that there is little tolerance that civil societies have anymore with continuous oppression. The oppression continues, no doubt about that. We see it everywhere. But what is changing is that civil societies are starting to rise, are starting to stand up, and are starting to express to the American public, to the international community, that we will not accept the continuation of such oppression. With that in mind, Tunisia exploded. Demonstrations in Tunisia, followed by demonstrations in Egypt, followed by demonstrations in Libya. And I, on purpose, would like to make that exercise with you so that we could go back to Sudan and look at the differences as it was introduced in your declaration. Why is it that it has been happening in the Arab world and not happening against Omar Bashir? That's your question. Well, if you recall, in the first few weeks of the Tunisian revolt and of the Egyptian revolt, who were the actual forces of the change, of the demonstrators? Young people, laptop people, Google people, Facebook people. Do you remember that in Egypt, first week, there was a Facebook site with 85,000 hits in 2 days? And in the Facebook culture that has not been seen in the Arab world or even in North Africa's world, putting your face is very dangerous. Never before 85,000 people said, these are our faces, these are our emails, these are our phone numbers, these are our jokes, and we are all coming to the demonstration. That is a revolution by itself. So, when the Egyptian authorities were faced with so many thousands of people at the same time, they couldn't send 200,000 people to grab 85,000 people from their homes and put them in jail. So a mass movement by many people at the same time, as in Beirut, 1.5 million people in the streets. Then the Syrian army couldn't collect 1.5 million people. So in the early stages of these revolts, there was really civil society. Youth, women in Egypt, minorities, workers, artists, cab drivers, they pushed. Now, when they pushed, the international community was impressed because they saw videos on YouTube. How many massacres have been done? And you are the best to know about that. How many massacres have been done in the past and went unnoticed, untestified to? You are among the people who can testify to this drama. Today in Syria there is a revolt, but everybody knows about the revolt. I remember in the days of the 80s, 1982, where a similar revolt in one city, Hama. Nobody heard about it. The Assad forces moved in, killed 20,000 people. 20,000 people in a few weeks. Nothing happened. Nothing happened because nobody saw it. And that's one of my recommendations now, is that it is very important that the public in the West in general, in America in particular, see. So that is a guidance for us, for the Beja cause in the future. The more we can see, the more we can show, the more we can get on video, on Facebook and elsewhere, the more we can count on citizens' awareness. And citizens' awareness would lead to lawmakers' awareness, and lawmaker awareness would lead to media and policy and what have you. That's one very important lead. Now, those frontliners in the Arab Spring, so-called Arab Spring, once they organized themselves in Egypt in Tahrir Square, political parties who were traditional in Egypt, Muslim Brotherhood, Wafd Party, and the other parties, stayed in the back. They did not move at first, because they tried before, and they were crushed. Once they saw that civil society got the protection of the international community and an umbrella was put